Today, we are diving into a really fascinating text from 1978, Ray Sherwin's The Book of Results. This thing is basically a blueprint for a kind of practical magic that cuts out all the complex ceremony. Instead, it focuses completely on the power of your own mind. So let's get into how it all works.
We're kicking things off with this quote because, honestly, it gets right to the core of Sherwin's whole philosophy. This isn't about finding a new religion or anything like that. It's all about radical individualism. It's this idea that belief itself isn't some fixed truth, but a tool, something you can pick up to get a job done and then put right back down when you're finished. So, here's our game plan for today. We're going to start with that core idea of believing nothing. Then we'll get into the practical stuff, how to pinpoint your own mental blocks, create a symbol for your desire called a sigil, and then power it up using a state he calls gnosis. And finally, we'll look at the big picture theory Sherwin built to explain how this all supposedly comes together.
Okay, this first principle is, well, it's everything. The whole system really hinges on you treating your mind like a completely blank slate. You have to consciously set aside all the dogmas and beliefs that we just sort of pick up over the years without even thinking about it. The goal here is total mental neutrality.
Now, the point of this blank slate isn't to just be empty-headed. It's about becoming incredibly mentally flexible. Sherwin's argument is that to really do magic, you have to be able to, say, fully believe in a healing goddess for the hour you're doing a ritual, and then drop that belief completely the second you're done. That mental agility is the real key, and you get there through some pretty rigorous self-examination.
And that leads us right into the first practical step. Before you can build something new, you've got to clear the land. And that means taking a really ruthless, really honest inventory of yourself to figure out what's holding you back. All the mental blocks, bad habits, and little neuroses.
Sherwin calls these limiting behaviors illicit activity. And as you can see, the list covers pretty much everything, from simple habits and appetites to much deeper stuff like fear, laziness, or just, doing things because that's what everyone else is doing. The whole point of this self-analysis is to get to a place where your actions are things you choose to do, what he calls licit activity, not just unconscious reactions.
Now, it's super important to get this. When Sherwin talks about a demon, he is not talking about some evil spirit from another dimension. He's talking about your own internal baggage. And here's the clever part of this whole system. You personify them. You give them a name, a symbol. Why? Well, because it is way, way easier to face off against and destroy some external thing you've created than it is to fight a part of your own ego that you've probably gotten kind of comfortable with.
All right, so once you've done that internal house cleaning, we get to the absolute core technique of the entire system, creating a sigil. A sigil is just a unique, personal symbol that you designed to represent one specific thing you want to make happen.
The classic method is actually pretty simple. First, you write down your desire in a clear, positive sentence. Step 2, you go through that sentence and you cross out every letter that repeats. And third, you take all the unique letters that are left over and you just get creative. You combine them and stylize them into a single, abstract little drawing. The key is to make the final design simple enough that you can easily picture it in your head.
So why scramble all the letters? Well, this whole design process has a brilliant psychological trick behind it. The final sigil represents your desire, but it's in a form that your conscious, analytical brain doesn't recognize anymore. That disguises the whole key. It's how you sneak the intention past your own internal censor. That little voice in your head that's always whispering, "That's impossible," or "You don't deserve that."
Okay, so you've got your symbol, but right now it's just a doodle on a piece of paper. To make it actually do something, you have to charge it. You have to implant it directly into your subconscious mind, and that is done through a very special state of consciousness.
To explain how this works, Sherwin actually borrows a psychological model. He basically splits the mind into two parts. You have the analytic mind, that's your normal, thinking, conscious self. But then you have the reactive mind, which is the subconscious. It doesn't reason or think, it just records everything, especially when that analytic mind is offline because of stress or exhaustion or you're knocked out.
Now, in the model he's using, a traumatic memory that gets stuck in that reactive mind is called an engram, and it can cause all sorts of issues later. Sherwin's big idea was to look at a sigil as a willed engram. You're basically doing the same thing, but on purpose. You're deliberately creating a symbol of what you want, and then intentionally planting it in that exact same subconscious space during a controlled moment when your conscious mind is out of the way.
And that controlled moment is achieved through something called gnosis. Think of it as a peak, trance-like state where your analytical mind just temporarily shuts off.
Sherwin says you can get there in two main ways, either through excitation, like ecstatic dancing, drumming, chanting until you're totally exhausted, or through inhibition, with things like sensory deprivation or super deep meditation. Either path you take, the goal is exactly the same, to open up a direct line to your subconscious.
Before you actually charge the sigil, it's pretty common to do a little ritual to clear the space, both physically and mentally. This is an example from the book called The Caltrip of Chaos. Don't think of it as warding off evil spirits. It's more like hitting Control-Alt-Delete on your brain. The whole point is just to silence all the everyday mental chatter, to create what Sherwin calls the capital letter and full stop for the real work that's about to happen.
So, let's walk through what a full ritual might look like. First, you get your space ready. Then you start to induce Gnosis, focusing like a laser on your sigil the entire time. At the absolute peak of that experience, you destroy the physical sigil, in this case by burning it, which sends that intention straight into your subconscious. And then comes the most critical part. You do the banishing again, and then you forcefully forget the whole thing. You have to forget what the ritual was for. That act of forgetting is what lets the subconscious get to work without your conscious doubts and desires getting in the way.
Okay, so we've covered the how-to, from the self-analysis all the way to the ritual. But why should any of this actually work? Well, Sherwin also gives us a kind of speculative model of the universe to explain the theory behind the practice.
This quote really is the key to the whole theory. For Sherwin, chaos doesn't mean disorder or confusion. It means the unformed, pure potential energy of the universe. The order that we see, the laws of physics, the patterns of life, that's just a convenient label we've stamped on top of it, like a barcode. The magician's job is to reach past that barcode and interact with the raw chaos underneath.
This diagram from the book is his map of how it all connects. You've got the individual mind on the left and the universe or chaos on the right. The sigil, when you charge it through Gnosis, acts like a little packet of information. It zips right past the mind's internal censorship and gets sent out to directly inform chaos, basically giving it a new instruction to reform reality around.
And these are the different parts of that mental map. You've got your core self, your analytical ego, your subconscious memory bank. But for this kind of magic, the two most important parts are C, the censorship mechanism, which is like a gatekeeper, and D, Gnosis, which is the key that unlocks the gate. Gnosis is what lets your intention, your sigil, sneak past that doubting censor and get planted right in the subconscious, where it can then be projected out into the universe.
And that really brings us right back to where we started, to the core idea of the Book of Results. It lays out a system where reality isn't this fixed, solid thing, but something you can shape. And your beliefs aren't who you are, they're just the tools you use to do the shaping. So the final question the book really leaves you with is a big one. If all that's true, what reality would you choose to build?